very clearly, humanity is drowning the cosmos with nouns for the divine. Names like Yahweh, Allah, Jesus, Brahma, Source, Consciousness, God, Lord, Master. Each of these words presumably were inspired or are inspired and signed off by the so-called Creator and taught in all of the holy books. And yet, not a single one survives the scalpel of history or the rigor of logic. The African sages saw this a long time before the ink dried in the books like Leviticus and the Gita and the Quran, before anybody had chanted these words in the first cathedral or mosque or temple. They named the soil, the ants, the mountains, the bloodlines, the invisible winds. They named everything that breathes and everything that does not breathe, that breathes, bends or doesn't bend.
Before the word,
but when it came to that which is beyond the origins or source, they stopped. They caved a phrase that is not a name. Muti usnazita umziti, the tree without a name. Not because they lacked reverence, but because they possessed epistemic discipline. To name the unnameable is not a revelation. It is a logical trespass. It is a sign of pure and total ignorance. The question, who is God, has haunted humanity for all times. While most traditions rushed to supply names, titles, epithets, and praiseworthy terms, we learned that black sages across the whole of Africa deliberately refused to create a name for this and only nameless a source. Amen. No, I do not know. The answer of why this is like that is given in our treatise, the book No More Masters. A razor-edged, sharp laser sword that slices through every creed, every cult, every cathedral of human thought, including the bastions of scientific facts. No human being, past, present, or future. No esoteric cabal, esoteric institution, prophet or priesthood, spirit, angel, or a god, or an epiphany that accompanies anyone by miracles and wonders has ever authentically described, nor will ever authentically describe the unknowable, nameless, real creator. The reason is not spiritual failure, it is logical necessity. No one knows. Every name invoked is not the intractable, unknowable creator. Every vision claimed, every doctrine etched in stone or whispered in ecstasy and frenzy is a subjective mental or spiritual idol projecting that human mind and imagination, no matter how poetic or profound. None of them is the real, unknowable, nameless creator, neither spirit nor being. The proof is not speculative, it is mathematically inevitable. You have to realize that billions invoke God, Allah, Father, Almighty, the Merciful One, daily, unaware that naming that which is beyond infinity is an error. That black sages avoided this and they chose silence instead of a word. Before the arrival of Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and all these book-based religions, our ancestors lived a holy life, revered the unknown. And in this video, we are exploring and we shall give clear proofs why you must, with all your being and fiber and the will, resist the temptation taught to billions today to give a God a name and they say this is the Almighty. Apologies for using this word and this noun, God. We have to do it through linguistic tools because we have to communicate and say something. But remember, this word is only employed for communicating the impossible idea only. You should not ascribe to it anything other than that. Remember this other fact. African Bantu spirituality has no holy books. Why? Because it is spiritual. It's not anything else. So we want to share here the flow of information and the pictorial evidence of what we are trying to say. The metaphysical descent that soon comes from the uncreated. This is the uncreated real creator. And this is the no contact possible, the chasm, which you call mukaha. It is the threshold where nobody has passed. It is the act boundary, absolute categorical threshold, this one. And also within it operates the waters of Nyunyu, which we call the QPF, which is the quantum potential, or the all possibilities and the all potential. That's where it is. This is where when you think you collapse events. This is where when you think you are being inspired, you are being inspired from this echo projection of gods and visions. It's not coming from the unknowable real creator. This ACT boundary serves as a metaphysical firewall. Everything above it is uncreated, is outside the reach of thought, of language, of prayer, of fasting, of everything that you can think about. And then everything below this line is the realm where consciousness begins to interact with potential. And therefore you can collapse events. And when you collapse events, and you are collapsing what you think is infinity in your finite consciousness through FCF, which is the finite consciousness filter. That's where your mind, your thinking, your spirit, your being, that's where you are collapsing it. And then it becomes part of your ego and your identity. And if you explode it and love it, it then becomes part of your religion, your mortality, and your proof of finitude, which is the emergence of reality and the worlds of your own imagination, still connected to echo projections or your potential to collapse events. So this is where your God dwells. This is where God and everything that you can name dwells. But when we go beyond the ACT boundary, we have to be silent. We can't say anything. Therefore, we want to offer three rational reasons for any thinker to realize that they must resist the temptation that God has a name, can be named, can be known. And by God, you have already seen that we are referring to that which is beyond knowing, not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Allah. So the first one is the universal assent test, followed by the semantic collapse, and then third by completely knowing anything is impossible. Because at the end of the day, you must resist the temptation to think God, this unknowable real creator, has a name, and see what happens. So the absence of universal assent proves that if anyone truly knew the creator's name, nature, and description, they would share it everybody, and everyone would recognize it instantaneously, like 2 + 2 = 4, without any argument. There will be no debates. We won't be saying something like this. So it will be powerful evidence in itself. It will be self-evident. So today you have to resist that temptation to give God a name, because there is no universal assent to the name that you give. So the absence of universal assent is a clear testimony and a falsification criterion that if any human being possessed authentic, complete knowledge of this creator's nature, that knowledge would compel universal acceptance through sheer self-evidence. There will be nobody who will be arguing. No one will argue with Moses, with Jesus, with Muhammad, with the Buddha, with Krishna, who claimed special knowledge. Billions would accept them, not reject or disagree with them. There will be no other religion at all, no denomination. Everybody would be accepting this as a truth. And then we can do our own things at the bottom. So this is what Black Sages taught and embedded in our consciousness before the arrival of these Johnny Came-led religions. Concepts like the withdrawn Oludumare, the distant Adroa, or the hidden aspect of Amen, Amunu. These are not epistemological failure. These are necessarily true. Because subjectivity of the 9.5 billion people on earth today means that objectivity is beyond and out of the window. So let's proceed. Because we have 9.5 billion people on the earth. Since there are, and the estimates given is that there have been over 100 billion people to have come on the earth, lived on the earth and died. What it means is that the disagreements that we have today involved 100 billion descriptions of God under the laws of subjectivity. Once more proving the fact that your God, even if you are under the same church, reading the same book, seeing the same visions, is completely different from the next man who is seeing the same, whether you use the same name or the same term or not. It's a fact. So this is bringing us to the semantic collapse, whereby we need to resist that temptation to give God a name and see what happens. Just like what our ancestors taught about Muzite. Every attribute given to God, love, wisdom, kindness, mercifulness, drags that which is beyond infinity down to your level, mental level, cognitive level. Black sages avoided this entirely by giving a process that needed no adjectives or description, that Mutusinazita, no name. Simple as that. All human words come from finite experience, from your experience, and then you are taking these metaphors, you are taking these experiences and trying to pin them on infinity. That is a categorical error that must be avoided at all costs. Then the third one is that it is totally impossible to completely know.
Kurt Gödel proves something
complete knowledge.
Any system complex enough
taught
to
by
express
many
arithmetic.
thinkers. Give an example here of Gödel's incompleteness theorems, where he teaches that and proves, and nobody has disproved him, and proves that any sufficiently complex formal system capable of expressing arithmetic cannot be both complete and consistent. It cannot prove all truths about itself from within itself. That's what Gödel says, a thinker, a logical thinker, a logician. So the creator, if we are to express this in terms of our understanding, the creator is not a spiritual shortfall. It is a logical impossibility baked into the architecture of a reason itself. So black sages intuited this Gödel's ideology before he came. They practiced epistemic hygiene rather than claiming false certainty. It's very, very important to understand this, that there is no complete knowledge from the same system. It cannot prove itself. So the irrefutable conclusion from all what we have said, from these three axioms, the universal assent test, not everybody accepts the definition or description of any deity or God. Semantic collapse, that the God that we have heard speaks in the language of some tribe, either Hebrew or Arabic. Once God speaks Arabic and not Shona, he's not mine. Totally true. And also complete knowledge, it cannot be the same thing. So the naming of the creator is logically impossible, psychologically self-defeating, semantically invalid, and scientifically impossible, and morally catastrophic. The black sages refused to name anything that they would say, this is it. So that was not a cultural preference or a lack of sophistication. We've already indicated they named everything. It was a rigorous intellectual discipline, the highest form of epistemic honesty ever. So you must resist the temptation to think that God is a name and see what happens to your life. The challenge that comes there is that you face three options. Either accept the proof of the three axioms and acknowledge that every named deity in history is a human construct, culturally meaningful, often beautiful, yes, but never the real. And then once you accept that, you join the sages in disciplined silence, or reject Gödel and reject semantic collapse and escape the incompleteness, and they reject what you can actually see in mathematical logic, and insist that subjective revelation and the absence of total universal assent doesn't prove anything. Reject that, and then once you do that, it means you are entertaining your thoughts and failing to distinguish delusion from reality. So the final verdict on this matter is that the black sages did not lack courage or revelation. They possessed something rare, intellectual integrity. They chose the silence that protects the truth over the noise that confronts it. Mutusnazta mziti still stands, the tree without name. It's not merely a symbol, it's not a code, it's a method. The question is not whether you will kneel before a name. The question is whether you will have the discipline yourself to stop naming and finally listen to what the silence has been saying to you all along. That which is beyond the so-called source or God or Allah or Yahweh or Jesus remains remote. Not out of cruelty or indifference, but because it lies beyond the jurisdiction of human language and intellect. So what's the way forward? It's a difficult and very impossible thing because every person wants a clutch to walk on. The idea of God is very sweet. We can appeal to that. We want a clutch to lean on. And nobody can envisage a life without God. But if you reject that name, you will thrive because you know the truth that you have, you first, your soul, your ancestors, and the divine first principles. To not only worship, but to demand of things, and they will respond. If your demands are yours, purely based and emanating from your own signature frequency. To learn how you can do that, first think on these 3 axioms and consider to resist the temptation to think that God has a name and see and experience a kind of intellectual epistemology that takes you where there is no description. I have gone through that experience. There are others that I know that have gone through that experience. And that experience comes only if you start by resisting the temptation to name God or to think that God has a name. And you see what will happen. Thank you for watching till the end of this video. You can subscribe, share, comment, and like. I am Hamanager to Pipri Jaraba, LM to Mizul Kurikanim Jaganja, a member of Marfat Family Network, saying, yes, consider these 3 axioms and think about them. And if you want to learn more, do not hesitate. Send us an email, which we are showing here. Amen.